We move on now to new business. Is there any new business anybody has before this committee? Chair Smith.
Thank you, Commissioner. So this week, obviously, we're getting to budget time, finalization. We've all been discussing this for a long time. I've had a lot of individual conversations. I've listened to what people have had to say on the board. I just passed you out something about kind of the main items that I would like to discuss with everybody in an open meeting. And we need to, do this for the next couple days. If we have to hammer out some agreements, what everybody is really passionate about. I mean, we have to get to this point by the end of this week. So I thought we should start today. Feel free so under the 2018 proposed budget areas of focus, if you don't see an area in there that has a big concern to you, then that just means that I haven't heard about it yet. But I'm certainly, obviously as a board, we're all in this together. So please bring it up. But I'd like to talk at least to these positions or these proposed budget items and where I'm at least feeling the most interest on this. So I'd like to start with talking about positions. And, we have a couple different options on the board. And, as we know that the executive and finance have recommended a number of new positions. Some of them, see you later, Mr. Santo. Some of them complete general funded, some of them combination general and grant funded. There's a whole different myriad of things. Some of these go right along with proposed changes in classifications also. So it's mixed like this in a lot of these, with new positions that are also mixed in with reclassifications that go on to then create the new position. So it's not as simple as reclassifications and new positions. A lot of them are intertwined, almost excruciatingly intertwined, if you would ask Crystal about this. So I'm going to say that I've heard a couple of different ideas. I've heard just give all the positions as proposed this year, and then let's talk about no more positions after this. I've heard and I've thought about also, maybe we just do the grant-funded positions because that's kind of smart money on things, and not do the other general-funded. However, there's a few general-funded positions that are pretty important also, right? I mean, if you look at it, so it's tough to separate some of these things. And then last but not least, and quite honestly, probably what I've heard around and feel most is that people were saying, we have a classification wage study coming up here. We are always open to budget amendments, in the year, and that maybe we might want to think about 0 new positions as a benchmark for this budget. So I would like to see if there's any discussion to the contrary, because where I'm leaning right now is to bringing out, based on what I've heard, it seems like no new positions seems to be where I'm hearing most, but I want to talk about it in this meeting and find out where everybody's at. We're not voting on anything today. We're just discussing this in open forum so we can kind of get to, so Wednesday's not a surprise, right, to anybody. I think that's the way it should be. We're going to discuss some things today. If it looks like we're coming down to, where I think a lot of people are going, well, whether we do or not, I'm going to also ask to talk to Mark Delden tomorrow morning and discuss, where I think this is going with him in the morning. And obviously, I won't have to discuss it with Steve because he's right here. And I'm sure Mark will already know by the time I talk to him. But anyway.
Chair, I've got a question.
Yes.
When we vote on the budget, do we vote on each individual budget or just vote on the whole overall budget? What if some commissioners think very highly of some of the budget but are concerned or don't support other departments?
Well, we don't split the budget up. We come up with a general overall something that we think that we can all live with and vote on. But before that, I mean, we do have an opportunity to vote individually as to what we're going to present as a full as amendments to where we're gonna go, right? So if you, at the end of the day, if you agree with, let's just put, so I think that by Wednesday, everybody wants, everything that I think I see everything, flowing in, but you have a different position on positions, for instance. You can float that out there and say, I really think that I like all this, but I'd like to take an individual vote on where we go with this position thing. And then you get a feel for that. Maybe it goes your way, maybe it doesn't. If it does, then that would be part of the budget amendment that we would propose, right? The budget that we would, send back and sign. But we don't vote on these individually for them. I mean, we do, but at the end, we propose a package.
So there, just to make sure I'm clear, there's never a point where we approve a specific department's budget and then move that forward to the full budget vote.
Correct, no.
Okay, so we either just like it or don't like it when it appears, the final budget. I mean, we do have the opportunity to make amendments.
Well, and that's where that would come in, right? I mean, if you feel that, like I'm missing something here, that you think that the, I don't know, the clerk's budget, you really, have something to say about it. It should be double, right? You bring that up as, amendment to our final, what we are going to vote on, and that's, it's in there or it's not based on what everybody feels on this. But at the end of the day, you're going to get a whole bunch of things that hopefully you're going to not love some of them as much as others. I mean, we're not all going to agree, 100% on all these. So, which is why I tried to take the ones that I thought I heard the most about. But your opportunity to convince everybody otherwise on any of these items or any other items is in the next few days. And Thursday obviously is the final vote, but Wednesday is usually the day that that most of the negotiation and conversation and voting and all of that is done.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you.
Didn't you?
I think, so if you had some specific things you wanted to do and you put them forth, and so we went through them as amendments and voted on them, and some went up and some went down. And then you get to the end of your document, you don't achieve 100% of what you want. You might achieve nothing of what you want. But the board has spoken on each individual one of those things. Now you're voting on a whole document. And this is where I see this. If every one of us voted no because there was something in that document that we didn't like, the county couldn't function. So where our vote counts is in the amendments attempting to make the changes. And then, because I've seen this a lot where you get there, okay, so then you have a split vote. 7 people vote for the budget and 6 people don't. Well, what if one more person worked the other way? Now we don't have a budget. The county can't operate. That's why I don't like that at the end. There's no way that the budget is going to satisfy every single one of us in every aspect. It's just not possible. So I make my fight in the amendments. And so I'll just throw it out there. I know you weren't keen on, like doubling the size of the budget for education. But since we have employees that go as well, I would just ask you to put $5,000 in there as an amendment. And if it doesn't pass, I'm fine with that.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
As far as our budget for conference and
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to vote. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. But I think if commissioners want a vote on something that's an amendment to the budget,
I don't have any issue with
Okay.
that, and I'll talk to that just for a second.
Okay.
Whether that goes or not.
But we're
I
talking
don't-
about getting a feeling, and are we going to get to a point where we actually vote on amendments, or are we just going to vote on a final budget after we get all our feelings out?
I think we're going to vote on amendments, and that's going to come up tomorrow.
Okay.
For sure, Wednesday, it will come up to vote for amendments to get to the final document, I think.
Okay.
So that's the way I see things going.
Okay, because
and then
I'm not
any
even,
final
some of these you're
changes-
going to speak to, I'm not even sure, like the bicentennial with the thought process. I have no idea what everybody else's thought process
Well,
is.
and I'm going to explain kind of where we're at with all of these different things a little bit, and then everybody can, chime in with this or anything. But my idea is that we're gonna kind of come to where I think we're gonna be by Wednesday, at least by what I'm hearing, but it doesn't mean that we're not gonna vote on any of the issues that if 3 people wanted this. Wednesday will be the day that we're gonna vote on amendments to the final.
Okay.
And then that'll give a day for Crystal and the staff to put everything together in the final, how we voted basically on this.
So for Commissioner Gillette, if there's anybody that wants to amend a section of the budget, they need to get that to your office so it can be in the list of amendments that would be available to the commission on Wednesday.
Sure. And we can, discuss it. Today, everybody would know, you would have an opportunity to work with the staff and figure out how it should be worded so that it's brought out properly on Wednesday, I think would be the day to do it. All right? So
Okay.
let me just go to, since you brought up a topic, I'll bring up the conferences and training, and that whether it goes, everybody wants it or they don't want it. I mean, we do have line item transfers within the department that I certainly would, if we didn't go, but we needed more money for conferences and training, I certainly would be all for, affording that line item transfer to people if we needed that money to, to go to more conferences. Just so you know, at the final end of it, it would work out the same. You might want it the other way, and everybody might want us to transfer that money right now before the budget. That's fine too, but it could
Okay.
also work the other way.
And before you go on to the next item, I have a question for Steve. Do
Sure.
you mind?
No, I don't
Steve,
mind.
when we're voting on a budget, we're voting on the revenues and we're voting on the expenditures, but if the revenues aren't what we're expecting in an area, have we already voted on the expenditures? So those expenditures are going, and this isn't grants, those expenditures are going to take place. And we have one department we know that is expecting to, or hoping to get money from the state. If we vote on the budget and that money doesn't come in, we've already voted on the expenditures, that money can be spent even if it doesn't come in? Because revenues end up being what they are, even though we
That's
vote
true,
on
I
it.
guess. It would depend on the nature of the department. So if you have a department who's funded entirely by grants, and we appropriate expenditures and we have some anticipated revenues, if those revenues are not coming in, generally those departments have a grant agreement and they can only submit for eligible expenses. If the revenue is not coming in, they're not going to spend the money because we end up in a deficit situation. So we're very good about doing that. In the general fund, however, which is 50-some% funded with property taxes, you have appropriations by department. If those expenditures are necessary, because 60 or 70% of our expenditures are personnel related, you could have a situation where we end up having our expenditures exceed our revenues for the year.
Okay,
Commissioner-
thank you.
Okay. Can I ask, were you speaking, no, just let me for 1 second, if you don't mind, because this is regarding what she just asked. Were you speaking to community mental health at all specifically? Because I know Commissioner Carabelli was looking at that, and he has some information on it
It's
as
the
far
thing
as.
that caused me to raise the question, but it raised a general question that while we vote on a budget that has revenues and expenditures in it, revenues actually end up just being what they are. We don't control those. So I wanted to know if we put it in expenditures, can it be spent even if revenue didn't come in? So
Okay.
yes, thank you.
And I would also add this, that is the administration's responsibility, and more mine specifically as the finance director, is to monitor the revenues as we go through the year, to hopefully get, catch any of those shortages if we need to scale back discretionary spending, if you will. And that's where the quarterly report comes in and all those sorts of things. But you could have the same situation where you end up with, I don't know, for example, back in 2008, all of a sudden you had property taxes take a nosedive, but we had expenses, we had personnel we still had to pay. We still have to function at a certain level, at least in terms of personnel staffing.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Toko.
Are you able to get a list of all of the positions that have been requested, the department, the funding source, and the effect on the budget before Wednesday? Okay. Can you circulate that today or tomorrow?
Thanks. Crystal has all that. She's worked with Steve and Steve Seitler about, getting all like I said, it's a tangled mess when it comes down to how much of the upgrades and reclassifications also affect the new position. You take a new position out, it changes a lot of the reclassifications, but Crystal has all of that. Thank you, Steve, and Steve Seitler got her all of that information, so it'll show the general net effect with everything on the budget is just under 500,000 position-wise, but another $125,000 in upgrades of, reclassification. So I mean, in general, we're over, I think, in the vicinity of $600 or more $1,000 to the budget.
Okay, will you circulate that? And then in the past, what we've done is when a commissioner has a budget amendment, if it's requesting additional positions or if it's requesting an amendment, we also tag with it the funding source or the proposal for where that funding would come or where that funding would go.
Yes.
Are we doing that again this year?
Yeah, I think that would make life a lot easier for everybody, but, yeah.
Point of information, there's no option. If you come in with a recommendation, you have to have
Funding, so-
Right,
Yeah,
but
and we-
if we're not going to fill these positions, then do you have a recommendation as to what we would do with that money, or would it just?
Yeah, back into the
gen-
general fund,
okay.
so we could keep that general fund up to, the balance where we look. It would not, I mean, I'm going to tell you that I don't have any additional expenditures in from anything I've seen from anybody in here where we're looking at taking from this but putting to this program like we've tried in the past and done in the past. So unless someone comes up with something, I have not heard that yet. I haven't heard anybody come to me or had anybody come to me with any, I would like to see this funded.
Okay, that was my question,
Yes.
if there was, and thoughts on where that money would go if we didn't fund those positions. And then my last issue is are we able to get before Wednesday a list of the clerk's overtime? What's been used so far in overtime?
So,
Through mid-September, we got reports from finance. They were only through September 15th, though.
so we're going to get to the clerks.
Well, I mean, I thought that was kind of like I didn't see clerks on the list, and that's
It's
sort of.
coming tomorrow. We have closed session tomorrow with Scott coming in about some other things going on with the clerk, so that's there. But we can talk about it. Crystal has all of the information up to date, and I don't know if you've spoke with Karen Bethanti yet. We've been trying to get with them.
She's out of town, so someone else can send it by tomorrow.
Okay, but she is working on that. If you
So do we have an idea of how much the overtime has been?
I don't know, I can find that out. I don't know right here today how much,
It'd be a good idea if you did.
yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
what I think we should do here, being that this is under new business, is given that Chair Smith has passed out, what I hope everyone has is a memo. Why don't we take the items one by one and ask people if they want to speak on that? The 6 items or so here. So the first item on the list is the additional positions, and I don't know, Chair, are you proposing, or you just want input on what we do?
Right now, I'm telling you what I feel I've got from, the response I've received from most people individually and in small groups was those 3 options, and quite honestly, most of them, a majority seem to be leaning towards the option that I would be looking at putting forth, and that would be 0 new positions. That's why, at this point, if anybody feels that it should be any different, I mean, now is a good time to start making your case. It's not the last time you could make your case.
Commissioner Leonetti.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and on of course, the subject of positions. So this question is for Chair Smith. The document that you're talking about that you and Crystal have developed recently shows about $625,000 of an increase in the budget. Is that correct? If all the positions were approved, is that right?
If the positions and the reclassifications were approved, that it looks, as far as I remember you talking to, it might be just a little over, so it was just under 500,000 for the positions, and the reclassifications totaled around $125,000. So over 600, probably between 6 and 625 would be the budget effect of those.
Okay, and is that for the 24 positions requested by all the departments or for the 16 recommended by the executive?
The recommended reclassifications and positions.
Okay. All right, and then I guess I have a question for Steve or any of the other commissioners that can answer this. I'll start first with, hold on, Steve. I'll start first with the commissioners. being a new commissioner, there was a lot of talk about hold the line. You know, there was talk in the past, and I don't know if it came from finance or from other commissioners, that, you know, we were advised to hold the line on new positions. Do any of the other commissioners have any recollection of that or any insight that they can provide me with regard to that? And then maybe follow up with Steve if he has a position on the new positions, if he can give us a position on the new positions.
Well, again, I believe each year stands on its own, so, you know, if we have new funding available or something like that, we evaluate new positions each and every year in and of itself. So, for example, I think 2 of the new positions this year are in veterans. That's all funded with a tax levy, so there's no effect on the general fund. So each and every year, we evaluate the need for certain positions every single year, all the requests. And we kind of build that into our forecast and the effect on the fund balance, and then we make a determination whether we feel that we're comfortable as an administration with that level of financing.
Let me ask you this. There's 16 recommended by the administration. There's 24 by all the departments, but 16 that the administration feels, well, maybe you should look at this. And I know some of those have grants, and some of them are neutral. Correct. In the sense, you know, let's take out the grant ones and the neutral ones. Let's talk about the ones that would have an effect on our general budget. Should we still hold the line, or do you feel, based on all your calculations and everything like this, that this is something that we should consider, some of these departments that are requesting these new positions?
I think we should consider what we've recommended. Now,
Okay.
whether, I mean, again, we've looked at the impact of those 16 positions and their impact on the financing or the fund balance of the general fund, and we're comfortable as an administration with the effect.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Steve. Just to let you know, Mr. Chair, you know, my position on this, and we had discussions, I know, is, you know, anything that has a grant associated with it, and I know we talked that you were going to try to find out if we'd lose that grant if we didn't fulfill that position. So in other words, I think one of the positions had to do with front of the court. I think that there was some grant money involved with one of those positions. So if we didn't fulfill that position, do we lose the grant money that's available? Because I would prioritize giving any positions where at least we have some matching dollars. If a department says, look, I need this new position, and there's a grant out there that's going to fulfill a good portion of that benefit and salary package, and we have to contribute a little bit from the general fund, I have no problem, in my opinion, approving those budgets. Now, my position could change if the grant money would be available whether we took it or not, and we could always ask for it next year, then I might not vote for it this year.
Commissioner, we're looking into that.
Okay, that's what I need to
We've
know on
We've
that.
asked some questions, and hopefully we'll have those answers tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest on that. But
Okay.
we'll try to get them tomorrow.
And just so the rest of the body knows, because I believe in full disclosure, that's where I would feel in terms of the positions. Anything grant associated, to where we get some money from somebody to fill that position, I'm very comfortable with fulfilling that position. There's a couple departments that I've looked at their requests, some of what the executive is recommending, you know, I'm on the fence on, but that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You asked a question about what we thought. You know, this year is an anomaly. This year is different than years past. And the biggest caveat to all positions is that we didn't commission it, but we authorized the funds for a commission of an employee compensation and classification study. And I don't know how we could approve reclassification or any position until that information is disseminated and HR says, this is the scenario, we're changing these classifications, we're doing this, we're doing that. I don't know, but do you think we could have a problem if we hired somebody and they say, well, that position shouldn't be getting paid that, and then they ended up being in the union, then we have a negotiation issue. Why would we hinder ourselves as a body of, and I'm not saying never fill these positions, but until that report and recommendations come from HR, I'm in a position of hold the line until that information gives us enough information to say, okay, this is fiscally responsible to do this. But until that information is given to us, how could we turn around and authorize anything? Because we can only be hurting ourselves. I can't see us helping ourselves. We have very bright department heads here and employees, and they ask for what they need. I'm sure they can all make a case for everything. But there's a time and a place, and the time is that report didn't come out yet before budget. And if it comes out 2 weeks after it, I'm willing to sit back up and take a look at it. But until that report is disseminated to us with HR's recommendation, I can't support hiring anybody at this time. Thank you.
I've gone dark. I can't hit my button.
Commissioner Lucido.
You would agree to that, Commissioner Carabelli, okay, as far as the grant positions go as well?
Some money comes out of the general fund for it.
Okay. Are there any positions that we've seen that they're fully funded? I don't think so.
Well, I believe that if you look at fully funded, it depends how you say it, I mean, but the veterans' positions are coming out of their millage.
Okay.
Right, so that might be even a different animal that we're not considering too, but I mean, it's, you know, it's all out there.
Right.
But that,
Information, and I may be wrong, but our HR policies still go to the Veterans Committee, does it not? Our classifications and all that? I'm asking.
I believe so, yeah.
So it'd be everything, and again, maybe we put the heat on them to hurry up and give us that report.
Right. And it's unfortunate that that report didn't come out earlier, because now really we're kind of going to look like, you know, hard guys by not approving anything. But had it come out earlier and we could have made, you know, more knowledgeable decision, I feel like that would have been good for us and everybody. But
Point of information, when
know
did that
when?
report start? Not to cut you,
No,
when did
it's
that
okay.
start? When did that, I've heard from people that it happened a year and a half ago.
Yeah, it happened sometime in the fall, a year ago.
and when is it expected to be completed?
I don't, it's in the works of being finalized, but I don't know the exact date.
Yeah. Okay.
Get back to committee. Well, on this issue, I just have my own personal thoughts before seeing other speakers lined up. It's a heck of a lot easier to hire people than it is to let them go. And if we run into a situation where revenues don't come in as expected or something like that, it's really very difficult to get rid of people. I don't mean to put it that way, but it's much easier to hire people. And even if the process is slowed down substantially by waiting till the report is due, I'd rather be more deliberative there, because again, it's just easier to do it, unless there's some crisis that will happen if we don't make the decision to hire the person the next month. If it gets delayed a couple months, what's the worst that can happen other than we have a little bit more deliberative process? So it's just my thoughts. Commissioner Smith, then Kleinfeld, then Leonetti.
I'll wait till the end and wrap up, that's fine.
Okay, Commissioner Kleinfeld.
I agree, we can always add the positions back in. So if you put forth that amendment, I'm supportive of it at this time. And also with respect to the classifications, weren't they going to look at every position in the workload that they're doing in order to make their determination? Okay, so so we already know going into this, because we've discussed it, if somebody comes back way overclassified, they're being paid too much because they have a light workload, we can't just go, okay, and lower their salary. But what we can do is, if those are departments that are requesting more positions, well, wait a minute, you've got some folks in your that are being paid quite well and their workload is very small. So we have every reason to wait for this. We have, and if we're going to get it by January anyway, this budget is for next year. We're only holding them off for a couple of months. So I'll support what amendment you come up with on this. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess too, that I didn't ask that question, or I may have forgotten, but we can always amend the budget to add a new position after we get this compensation study. Okay. So I guess the only thing I'd go back to is the grant money. I just don't want to lose that. If there's you know how grants are. I mean, there might be a time frame where we have to have the position available and there, otherwise we lose the grant funding. So I would like, and I know it's short notice, I know we only got till Wednesday, but I would definitely like to know that. I think that would be part of our prudent analysis, is to determine if we don't provide the position, is the grant money gone? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kleinfeld, are you still on the list, or did you want to speak again? Or Did I?
No, but just for clarification, once we voted on the budget, if it's, Executive Hackle has to bring the request forward if it's a department of his. So I just want, if he doesn't bring it forward once we've voted on the budget, we cannot go back and go, oh, we've changed our mind, we want to. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other speakers before we go to Chair Smith on the issue of new hires, new positions? Okay. To wrap that up then, Chair Smith?
Thank you. So first, I have found out about a few of the grants. I'll find out about the rest of them. But so far, no issue yet with that, losing the money by a certain date. And second, I do agree, and I'll just tell you with Commissioner Kleinfeld and Commissioner Carabelli, that it's easier to add, and I'm sure a number of you, easier to add these things after than to get rid of them. And based on the compensation study and the reclassification study, I think it really is a smart money to do. And also, what I'm planning on doing this year, and Executive Hackle does this, he does a budget message, like he write, there's something that they try to do, and with the 20% of the budget or the general fund and everything. I'm going to add that this year to our budget amendment, and throw in some of the reasonings behind this so that there's no question as to why we're doing things. I think we wish that we would have, some of those darn charter commissioners would have done that in the charter. It would make things a lot easier. So I figured we might as well do that with this budget, and kind of throw in, if this in fact is the way this works with positions, that we believe that it's, prudent to wait for this study to come out, and that it doesn't preclude anybody from coming back after that to ask for an amendment. So I would put that in there. And that being said, I'll move to one that I think is going to be a quick one, and the easy one is bicentennial celebration. I have an email from Pam, there you go, stating that at this point, on November 1st, that the Bicentennial Committee has collected $6,000 and are now at $73,500 of the total of $80,000 in commitments. So $80,000 was their target. That's what they were asking for us for originally. They said they have committed $73,500. My thought on that is that I could see us putting $6,500 in to cover that difference if they do not get to the 8,000 or the 80,000. There's also an option of just not putting anything in there and saying, hey, if you don't get to it, come to us, because that's such a small and insignificant amount. We could add it then. We could do a bunch, number of different things. I think that it's pretty minor at this point, based on the fact that Pam says they have that kind of money already committed. My thought is to just put $6,500 in on that and pull the rest out. Anybody has any other thoughts on it?
We've got Commissioner Romano on.
Hold on a second.
Wait,
Let me hear what the finance director has to say.
What do you got, Steve?
It's more the proper accounting for it, so I don't know if you're talking about just having an appropriation line item for the 6,000.
Well, I
Because
mean,
what we would need is an appropriation for either the 80,000 or the 77,000 with a corresponding revenue of 77,000.
okay, well, you know that better than I do.
Right,
So
I just
based
wanted,
on,
just so you're clear on kind of how
Okay.
to write your amendment, so you don't reduce the appropriation to 6,000, then there's only 6,000 to spend.
got it. Okay, I'll make sure that Crystal
Yeah.
talks to you about that. But like
Certainly.
I said, Pam sent this email over, so I'm going to guess that she probably wouldn't have put it in writing unless she really had that kind of money. So I
Yeah,
think
my
that-
understanding is she has the written commitments.
Yep.
So it's just a matter of getting the line items
Right.
straightened out in the accounting system or anything else.
and that's good. I just don't.
Yep.
I'd just like to adjust that appropriately. So
On the list right now, I've got Commissioner Romano and Commissioner Kleinfeld. So we'll go to Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. Why don't we take that $6,500 and give it to the commissioners for their conferences, and that's money that we don't have to appropriate. They've got $73,500. If they can't complete what they're going to do with $73,500, shame on them, and they still have time to go. So let's take that $6,500 that we were looking for and give it to the, put it in the commissioner's slush fund for their conferences, and then we don't have to worry about it. That's my vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We could also delay it and have a 201-year anniversary if we give them another year to collect the $6,000. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Okay, Steve, are the revenues in the budget? No. So what we would do is we would keep the 70,000 in there, but we would add 70,000 to the revenues.
Well.
Because if you're
one or two
saying there
things.
would be a corresponding, that's.
One or two
I-
things. If you are okay with appropriating $6,000 of general fund money for the bicentennial, you would simply add revenue, or actually it's less than 77,000, so 3,500 or $3,000, right?
6,500 is the left, what's left. It's 73.5 is
Is
what
it
she's
73.5?
committed.
Okay, excuse me. So if you're okay with $6,500 appropriation, you leave the $80,000 request and add $3,000.
No, because
revenue.
accounting-wise, that means whatever, it doesn't matter how much money comes in, they're spending 80,000. It doesn't matter what
Correct.
we appropriate.
Correct.
So that is not what the question is. So they were saying, well, let's just put 65 in there, and we can't just put 65 in there. We have to put 80,000 in expenditures in there. We're anticipating only 65 will come from our budget. So if we're anticipating that, we would have a corresponding revenue in the
That's
budget.
what I
If
was
there is,
indicating earlier. Yeah, you'd have a revenue of 73.5, an appropriation of 80. The net effect is $6,500
Okay,
coming from the
that's-
general fund.
yeah.
If you're not okay with that, you would just put in the 73,500 of revenue and 73,500
yeah,
of
no, I
expense.
mean, yeah, I'm okay with that, but we do want to put the 80,000 in revenue in. You're saying it's not in there right now.
There was no revenue at all in the recommended budget
So
for the
it's the
bicentennial.
revenue side that has to be changed, not the expenditure.
Right.
Right. I think,
Depends what you want to do. Again,
okay.
Okay, so just by clarification,
Crystal has it.
they've collected the 73.5. That's a commitment of 73.5.
I think they've only collected around 6,000 in actual cash. They have written commitments for the remainder.
Oh, well, can't we make sort of a commitment for the money, but not actually give it to them? No, I'm just kidding. No,
Creative budgeting, okay.
spirit, we're committing the money. But no, I would hope that this is my, personally, again, not seeing another speaker on there, I would hope that it's a point of pride that the money is voluntarily contributed. I mean, we're not providing a court service, a sheriff's service, important county functions that people expect. It's a celebration, and that's nice. And I think it's a point of pride that people have gone out and raised that money independently. And even if they have to cut that budget 7% from what they expected, if they don't raise that additional 6,000, they're still funded 93% of it. And it's worth that 7% cut that we can brag that this was funded voluntarily and that everybody contributed voluntarily to this. It loses a little of that that spirit of volunteerism when we put $1 in for such a relatively modest amount of differential. So I would hope that if this ends up in the budget, that would be an amendment that we could vote on if there's not a consensus on that with regard to that. I mean, it's a relatively small amount, but I think it's from my perspective, it's important. I like to go back and tell people that we provide what's absolutely necessary for our constituents. That we provide, we want every dollar to go to the most core essential services. And they're going to come back at me and say, but didn't you blow thousands of dollars on a party? We could explain, it's a bicentennial. Whether you like it or not, most of our constituents won't be going to that. Most of them won't. A few will. Some will. And I'd rather have it makes it easier to say, no, that was all voluntarily raised, and there was no tax dollars that were taken from any other department for that. So that's just my 2 cents. Is there any, Commissioner Lena, are you on the third round on this?
Yeah.
Okay,
So this is
thank
my
you.
first round on this one. Yeah, my position on it, Mr. Chair, is that I concur with what Commissioner Drollet says and Commissioner Romano. If they've come up to 73.5, they've come up really close to the $80,000 mark they have. We've got some issues that we talked about earlier with these positions. We've got to worry about capital projects plan. We just heard the gentleman talk about the courthouse is changing things, so we don't even know where that revenue is going to come from yet, if it's going to come from the court budget or if it's going to come from the capital expenditures. So I just think that it's an important celebration. I don't want to knock it. And I totally think that the fact that volunteerism and contributions have come forward makes it that much more special. And so my position on it is I would make a motion now to receive the 73.5 and appropriate 73.5 for their plan. That would be my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there another speaker on this round on the bicentennial celebration?
Well, we're under new business.
No, this is on new business. This is not a Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the capital projects plan. Everybody okay with that? Why don't you frame it for us, Mr. Chair?
Great. So most of you, I mean, we've had discussion about that we've hired a company called the Raymond Group. They're one of the largest accounting firms in the area to look at our practices on our budget and how we look at things and how, especially this year, we just picked one because we had a lot of disconcern about the capital projects fund. We had them look at our method of what we're doing with this and telling us if we're looking at this properly or we should be asking, for things in a different way or how we should be doing it. I had a draft that they're revising. They've come back a couple times on things, and quite honestly, what I really want to make sure with them is that it comes back in a form that's is easy and to understand by us, not accountants, as possible. And it's come a couple times. The first time I didn't know what they were talking about. Next couple times, we've addressed what they're talking about, and they've simplified it and brought it down a little more clear. There was a few things I just was texting her to see if she had that final draft that I could get to everybody right now. But what I will say is this: I will email a copy of their draft that I should be getting today to everybody, either tonight or tomorrow morning. I'm also asking them to show up for the meeting on Wednesday, so that any questions about this or their process or their recommendations on what they've come up with, we would have an opportunity to question them for our own understanding of this also. So I can tell you that as of right now, in general, let me just kind of paint a broad picture. There's 13 million or so in funding that's will be rolled over, correct, into the capital projects fund. About 13 million, right? Their recommendation on the way that we look at things, I got to tell you, they kind of shook their head at what we do by giving a lump sum of money to that project fund without any line item. Everything is basically estimated and does not even necessarily have to be done for that money. I can honestly tell you, they said that they've never seen it done this way anywhere. Their recommendation was a couple different recommendations. The first one was to cut everything out of the capital fund and make the executive or the F&O come to the commission with every project on an individual basis and just make sure that all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed and everything, just like a normal contract would come before us, and appropriate the money per item or per project. That being said, we also looked at the fact that there's already $13 million in there. Their second recommendation was put some money in to start, the capital projects fund, so you don't interfere with anything that's currently going on. And, then there's plenty of leeway and plenty of notice that, hey, this is the next project we're looking at. This is the money we're going to need. Come to us and go through it that way. Well, because of this 13 million, it looks like option number 2 is kind of the option that they're leaning toward, because they had talked about trying to get that money to go back into the general fund, which I don't know. I don't know if it's a logistical, a legal, or an accounting impossibility or improbability. So it looks like they were going to say, at the end of the day, they're saying, keep the 13 million in there. That keeps things running just fine for quite some time. But adopt don't fund it anymore, keep it in the general fund and make the appropriate requests as you see these projects coming. It's a strengthening of the oversight and the transparency on what happens with that money for the board. So I don't have that document. I will get it to you guys as soon as possible. Then you can look at it, we can discuss it more tomorrow. So I'm just telling you in general what I've seen from this and where it's going. I guess we could probably save this conversation to the greater depth till tomorrow, because I know you'll all have that draft by then and have a chance to look through it and read it. And then we can talk about what they recommend and then what we see, what we might want to change, whether we agree with it or not. I mean, that's the next step. So.
Oh, Mr. Chair, if you're done, I've got a couple questions on the voting process again with regard to the budget. And the question is there any opportunity, I mean, when the budget is presented, it's presented by the executive. I don't know if I don't know if we as a board then have the opportunity to pull things out of the budget and vote on them individually. Suppose we wanted to pull the capital fund component of the budget out and vote on it separately from the full budget. It's not in the budget. Now, why are we talking about it? I thought they were voting on the budget coming up. Okay, pull the funding for the capital fund out of the budget, and could we pull that out as a board, and then have a separate debate on that, and then approve or reject it, and then, so to speak, put it back in with the. Can we change the amount? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, so it's similar to any of these. We can pull it out, vote amongst ourselves, and then put whatever we come up with back into our complete package, right?
So in theory, we could pull out every department and vote on their budget independently, and then put it back in.
In theory, we could do that, right? I mean, we're looking at what we're going to amend, if we're going to amend this budget, and what we're going to amend,
right,
and the reasons behind it. So yes, we could theoretically, I would say. I mean, that's why, of course, I tried to limit it down to,
the items that come up, yeah.
I mean, we could do this, especially if it wasn't Monday of the week we're passing the budget. But nonetheless, yes, your theory in general is correct.
And another general question that we're going to go to Commissioner Kleinfeld back on the list there. General question is, are we statutorily required to finish the budget by a specific date? Do you know the answer to that question?
The reason that we're going to look at voting this week is actually we work backwards from the end of the year business dates on the dates that are required, that the executive has X amount of days to veto, and then we have X amount of days to potentially override that veto. So what we do is we kind of work backwards to.
And then gives us a deadline.
And we have enough time for all of that to happen.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Okay. I think what Chair Smith was saying with respect to the funding on the capital plan is exactly what you were saying, because we throw the money in there, and it's once we put it in there, it doesn't matter what the list of the projects were. It ends up being spent on whatever it's needed to be spent on. So the projects we think it's getting spent on doesn't necessarily go that way. So I think that you were talking about the same thing with regard to that. Now, when you transition into, can we pull every department out and vote on them? I think it might be something we could look at next year, but we're actually right now in the week that we're voting on the budget, and it seems to me it would be impossible to get through it in order to vote on Thursday. So, thank you.
Okay, are there other speakers on this particular element of the budget, the capital projects plan? Seeing none, we move to Parks and Recreation.
Okay, Parks and Recreation, it comes from the report that they gave that there's going to be $40,000 spent on, I can't even remember off the top of my head, but it was a master plan for Parks and Rec. And the question was asked, well, there's a significant amount of money in the Parks and Rec fund. Why are we pulling 40,000 out of the general fund to fund this when they have, I don't know exactly the amount. I don't know if Crystal knows or Steve knows, but there's a significant amount in the Parks and Rec fund. I don't know if it's maybe, I guess this is a good question to ask of Steve. I don't know if it's, if there's limitations on what can be spent out of there, or maybe that this could not be spent out of there or what, but I don't understand why we wouldn't take Parks and Rec money out of the Parks and Rec fund that's just been sitting there doing nothing, especially when it's 40 grand. So you can look at it either way. It's not much to the general fund, but it's also not much to their,
Master plan, which just which does not include just Freedom Hill Park. I mean, it's a countywide Parks and Recreation plan, as I understand it, so if
the
it's
money
not
is-
specific to only Freedom Hill, you know, it's more of a philosophical discussion of who should fund it.
And I'll tell
And
you
it's a
that-
planning activity in our estimation,
all right,
but
so that's probably the first time that, it was even kind of explained like that. And that makes a little more sense to me, and quite honestly, I don't have a real opinion on that. I just remember that coming up, and that was a question that we had, why wouldn't we spend it like that? That makes sense to me, and like I say, it's $40,000. I'm not gonna, one way or another, I just was
Right.
curious if it is Freedom Hill money technically that's getting spent on a countywide basis. That makes sense. I just wanted to throw this out there for discussion. I don't know that anyone was really super hot on this. Steve might have, even cooled that fire a little bit with that statement right there, but if anyone wants to discuss it, fine. At this point, I'm looking at not doing anything with that.
So are there any speakers? We have Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question, if I recall, isn't this Parks and Rec's going to fall under JP's control now, in a sense? Wasn't there
that's where the
the plan
recommended
money?
or the requested appropriation for that master plan is in his contractual services.
Right, the 40,000 would
The
go under
40,000.
him. Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Steve.
Meaning you don't plan on moving that, or you don't?
My plan is to leave this just the way that they brought it to us, have proposed it, unless there was some, big upswell of, maybe we should take that out of there. But I just remember that being a question that seemed to sit a little.
Okay, I just wasn't sure. Okay, I got it.
Okay, Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. I think I brought this up last time, I'll bring it up again. Mr. Schmiegel brought it up about the Freedom Hill thing. There's $40,000 there. The park is used daily, and they can't use the restaurants. They defecate outside the restaurants, or out the restaurants, yeah. That looks good for the restaurants. For the restrooms, I don't understand, I don't understand why we can't get somebody in there, even on a part-time basis, to at least keep the restrooms open. I just don't understand that. We've got $40,000 in there. It's used a lot. I know it's in my district, but everybody uses it. And I just don't understand why we can't maybe allocate that money to keeping the restrooms open over at Freedom Hill. That would be my thought, and that's what I'd like to see. Thank you, Chair.
I don't have another speaker, so go ahead, Mr.
I just wanted to that point, Commissioner Romano, is that we can allocate money to anything we want, but the executive has to actually implement it, right? So we can say, we want you to hire armed guards sitting outside that bathroom, and we could put all the money in there, but he would have to say yes. So I mean, that's probably more of a negotiation type thing to say, listen, you guys have money in that fund. Couldn't we think about having this? Maybe we do a petition. Maybe you do something like that. Because I understand. I mean, that's right on the path. It does get used a lot. But just so you know the generalities of this, we can put money in for anything we want. That does not mean it gets spent on that.
I would rather have constituents know that it was the executive office that turned it down and not this particular board, because we have feelings for them. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no speakers on this particular round again, I just throw my 2 cents in, and that is, don't we just have one park and one trail? We have to spend 40 grand to have a master plan for a park and a trail? I mean, I may have missed something there. Go ahead, Commissioner Carabelli.
Real quick, point of information on that. Technically, you're correct. But unless the county comes up with a master plan, and it's every so many years they have to do it, the municipalities and cities within the county are not able to apply for DNR trust fund grants, SEMCOG grants. I mean, there's a whole litany of them. So this is one piece to a puzzle that we have to have for us to be eligible to receive DNR trust funds and all the other stuff. So this is a necessity, is that plan.
I appreciate that explanation. We could just reapprove our last plan, call it a new plan, and save 40 grand.
That's a heck of a plan.
That would be my plan, to save 40 grand, and we can use it to toilet paper for the restrooms at Freedom Hill. But, all right, so any other speakers on this particular item of the Parks and Recreation? Okay, seeing none, next item is IT Department, and we'll move to Chair Smith.
So this goes back to the $80,000 a year ago that was removed from their contract services in order for the board to approve a new position in their department. And I know there might have been some miscommunication here, but there was no miscommunication on the side of the board that that $80,000 was kind of a trade-off to then hire that position. Well, this year, that $80,000 made it back into their contract services, and there's still that position being funded in there too. So, I mean, yes, from the general fund, right. So my, you know, I've talked to several people about this, that it was not a one-year trade-off. Unless that position was going away in 1 year, it was not a one-year trade-off. So my thought on this was that $80,000 that we agreed to get rid of was not a one-time, one-year event, because the position was not a one-year event. And I think most everybody kind of remembers that. And although it may have been portrayed or may have been understood differently by the IT director, that was not the understanding that I had, nor any of the other commissioners that were here last year about that. So my thought on that was to remove that $80,000 from, based on talking to everybody, that would be the fair way to go, because we can't horse trade this year and then next year it's a whole different story. So I mean, I'll tell you what I've got from people on this, and if anybody wants to discuss this for or against, Steve, I understand that maybe some maybe some miscommunication between us in finance or us in IT or everybody in there on that. And I don't know if you're familiar with this. I don't expect you to remember every single thing that happened last year, but we did bring it up again in the IT budget hearing this year. It was brought up. So I don't know if you have anything to add to this. If not, I don't want to grill you about it, but if you can shed some light on it.
Yeah, I don't really have anything other to add, unless you suggested Jake will come back on Wednesday and explain the need for his contractual services to go back up to that previous funding level. I mean, that's just going to be a repeat of his budget hearing, I would think, but that would be my recommendation. And I can't remember what his justification was necessarily from his budget hearing.
I'll just say it was interesting that it was 80, and 80 was brought out last year, and I specifically remember it, like there was well, take this out because this position will kind of eliminate the need for that. And then it's reappeared in the exact same amount, which maybe that wasn't the right, maybe that wasn't a good idea. Maybe it should have been 74.5 or something. It wouldn't have, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, right. So anyway, that's, and maybe we will. Maybe that's the way to go with this. I'm not really sure. It's just it was something that I know that happens. It's happened probably more than we've realized in different things, when we've given up something and then a year or two it came back. But you know, we haven't had the best, and quite honestly, that's our own fault for not having the proper tracking methods on things that we've done and requests that we've made, and sticking to them year after year to make sure that they don't come back in, whether accidentally or on purpose. So that's, I would just say this is one that I, feel like, and I know talking with some other commissioners, feel like we kind of should turn our head a little bit on that one. So any other comments on that, please feel free. Otherwise,
are there thoughts or comments on this particular item, the IT department? All right, Commissioner?
Well, my thought might be then, since there's no real strong opinion either way, is to have Jake will come and invite him anyway. I mean, I can't have him come, but I can invite him to come and speak to that, maybe tomorrow, or I don't know if he's scheduled to
Well,
come
Mr.
in,
Chair,
or he
if
might
we
be.
don't approve that, we can always add it later if it becomes a crisis, correct?
Correct.
Okay, my thought is we don't add it, and then let him come back before us and make his case, and if it makes a good case, we'll add it. That would just be my thought.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Next item is not on your agenda, but was added during the conversation earlier, which is a conference training for $5,000. That was for the board, staff, and employees, I believe, and is that a correct item on the agenda? You're looking at me like, no, Mike. But
Well,
you,
it's not on the agenda. That was one that Commissioner Kleinfeld said she
Okay.
was going to bring up as a,
As
possible
an amendment, and the
amendment.
funding would be from contract services.
Right, it would be more of a line item.
I see. Okay, so we've got that
She's gonna
covered.
bring up, and we talked about it. I mean,
Okay. All right, are there any other items under new business?